tonight, huh?
Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it.
Bruce,
Yes?
are you there?
Who's asking?
It's me, Lionel, the guy on the 48th floor.
Oh, in that case, yes, I am here. I was I was curious if it was local constabulary or not, because there may or may not have been an incident.
All right.
We won't go there.
Okay. We can't tell anybody why, but
No.
hum us a few bars of the theme from the Magnificent Seven.
Bum, 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 bum. Everybody knows that tune.
Yeah, I guess they do, eh?
Oh, well, if you're a certain age, you'll know that tune.
Yeah, that
Shane the Young Gun might not, but
Yeah.
pretty much everybody else will probably know that. What a great movie, too.
And that was, what, in the 60s, the original one?
I think, yeah, mid-60s, late 60s, somewhere in there.
You know what? Well, that'll be the first question we ask our guests today.
Ah, good thinking.
Yeah, that'll be our first question. When was the original Magnificent Seven? I bet you he'll know. He's just one of those kind of guys.
Just one of those guys who knows all.
Yeah. We're going to talk to a fellow named Greg Javenello, who I met at the Springfield train show or the Amherst Railway Society train show or whatever. Today I've been doing a lot of intros and outros for the Springfield interviews that I did.
Yes, you were quite the busy chap at Springfield.
Yeah, and I'm starting...
Bustling about and talking to thousands and millions of people, I'm thinking.
And I'm starting to get punchy because I keep doing these intros individually. Oh. And it's like, oh, hey, it's time for another interview from Springfield. Or the Amherst Railway Society Model Railroad Show, or whatever it's called, at the Eastern States Exposition Grounds.
A.K.A. the Big E.
The Big E. And what did you know it was the Connecticut River that ran through Springfield?
Yes, I did, from our first visit there some 5 years ago.
Wow. See, I don't remember anything. All right.
Yeah.
Greg came up
and by the way, it's 1960.
Oh, very good. Well, we were going to ask Greg, though.
Well, now we know the answer and see if he knows.
Ah, that's a good idea. Yeah, we won't let on that we already know the answer.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. Can you, Greg, come on out of the green room.
All right.
Wow, that was fast.
Oops.
It's like he was just at the starting block, ready to go, and here he is.
Just
All
like,
right. Well, hold on. Let me put down the shrimp. Let me.
I'm going to say, the shrimp is getting funky.
Yeah.
The shrimp's getting funky and forcing them out. So.
Okay. So, Greg, are you ready for our first question?
Sure.
What year was the original Magnificent Seven movie released?
You got me, man. Westerns aren't really my thing, unfortunately.
It was, okay. I will give you some choices. 1958, 1960, or 1983.
I'd say 1960.
Oh, good one. Well done.
Hot dog, we have a wiener.
Yeah. And that's usually, see, when I was in high school and we did the multiple choice questions, all you had to do was find the rhythm. A couple of B's, a couple of C's, the odd D, and don't be stingy with the A's.
I just went abacadabra all the way down.
Oh, yeah? All right, Greg. So now you're gonna be on the Big Shoe. We're gonna interview you on the Big Shoe, and you live in New Orleans.
Yes, I do.
And have you always lived there?
No. I moved here from Massachusetts, but I was actually born in a much maligned state on the AML, Rhode Island.
Oh, anywhere near the Big Blue Bug?
Yes. I tell you what, I used to, I went to, and it's actually the home of my alma mater too, and I actually used to pass the Big Blue Bug when I went to school every morning.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yes, that was part of my commute.
And what was your alma mater?
Johnson and Wales University in Providence.
Providence, Rhode Island. So you grew up in Rhode Island?
Well, I grew up in a lot of different places. My father was in the military, so I lived in was born in Newport. Lived in Virginia for a little while when I was really young, and then we moved back to Newport for until I was in second grade or so, and then we moved down to Charleston, South Carolina.
Right.
And my father retired there after the first Gulf War, and then we moved back up to Massachusetts, which is where my mother's family is. So she wanted to be closer to her family.
Okay, so that's where your parents are now?
Yes, yes.
All right, and how did you end up in New Orleans? Is it New Orleans?
It's New Orleans. So it's people like to say Nolans and stuff like that, but nobody ever actually says that down here.
No, I have a buddy of mine that was born and raised in New Orleans, and that drives him nuts. People come up and go, "Is it New Orleans?" And he goes, "No, it's New Orleans."
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's New Orleans. It's New Orleans. It's not New Orleans.
Oh, New Orleans. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Unless you're Canadian, then it's New Orleans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it's Ottawa or Toronto.
Yeah, we'll give you a pass on that one.
All right. So then I guess that means you're a Boston Bruins fan if you're at all interested in hockey.
Yes, I mean I do like hockey. I don't follow it as closely as I'm sure you do. But I have been to a Bruins game, and I do enjoy actually going to the games as opposed to just watching it on TV. I find it a lot funner. That's not a word.
Yeah. It is now.
Don't worry, we're not English majors on the AML.
Yeah,
in case you haven't noticed.
I only have a vocabulary of 27 words, so you're okay.
Okay, but I've been to a Bruins game, and I've been to a Tampa Bay Lightning game. I know you're a big fan of the Lightning.
Yep.
Go Bolts.
Yep, go Bolts.
And the Leafs.
And the Leafs. Those are my two teams now. For a while, my second team was the New Jersey Devils, just because you had to love a team that had red and green uniforms and were called Devils. But then when I bought a house in Tampa and I started going to a lot of their games, that became my second team. Blue and white. If you're a blue and white team in the NHL, you got a chance with me. There you go. So anyways, great news or bad news, depending on who you are. Last night, Bruce and I enjoyed dinner together while we watched the Toronto Maple Leafs beat the Boston Bruins.
Yes, indeed.
So it's a great day here in AML land for us. Okay, so how'd you end up in New Orleans?
So I went to. I've always had a love of food, and I went to culinary school in Providence. That's Johnson and Wales, and right after college, actually a week after I had graduated, I had already lined up a job working at a restaurant in New Orleans. It's you've probably heard of it. It's called Emeril's Restaurant.
Right.
He's the guy that used to be on the Food Network.
Yep.
Bam!
Yeah, him. He was. I worked on and off for him both before and after Katrina, Hurricane Katrina, and for about 2.5 years. And then when the economy kind of hit the skids and reservations were down, I had to make a career change. So I actually got into the distribution part of the business, and a friend of mine knew somebody who was in the distribution business, so I figured I'd give it a go, and that's where I've been for the past almost 10 years now.
All right. So now, the thing I liked about when you came up to me was you were like 35 years old, and you were like, you'd heard. How'd you find the podcast?
Just searching on the little podcast app on my phone. I knew that there's podcasts for pretty much everything, so there's got to be one for model railroading. So I found you. Your podcast seemed to be the most entertaining and the most, I guess, professionally well done. So and so that's what I listen to when I'm at work doing tedious computer things at the computer.
Oh, cool. Bruce, I think that's the first time we've ever been called professional.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I can't ever recall that word being bantied about at the AML.
No, this is quite a historic day at the old AML network.
It is.
You have a little bit more polish than most.
You know what? We try to do.
You have listened to the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
I try, it's like anything I do, I try to do it as well as I can because it's more fun if you do a good job. So yeah, in the early years, it wasn't as polished, but it gets better and better as we go along. So let's back up a bit because I was excited when you came up to me because you're in your 30s. And if you've listened to a few of the podcasts, and we're always talking about how the NMRA is constantly wringing their hands about, oh my gosh, we're not getting anybody else into the hobby because of the new age. And I'm like, no, I don't see that at all. But
no, I don't either. And it's as far as technology goes, like I'm a member of a club, Crescent City Model Railroad Club in Metairie. And they made the decision maybe about 10 years ago to go to DCC, and they haven't looked back. And then, like when I joined the club, I mean, there were teenagers, even younger than Shane the Young Gun, who knew about DCC, and I was actually asking them how to do stuff. So I was like, there are kids out there that are embracing the hobby and that are even far more technically talented than even I am. I'm learning it because I want to learn it, but there are kids that are growing up with it, and it would be the NMRA would be remiss as an organization to just kind of discount that.
Yeah,
and
this is too early in the show for me to be sucking up to you, so don't take it as that. But the thing that impressed me about you is you were well-spoken and everything, and you came right up. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy, I remember talking to you, and I'm thinking, this guy is exactly what the hobby's about. Like, don't tell me nobody's coming into the hobby, because here I am sitting with a 35-year-old guy that speaks up and is well-spoken and is travel. And you were telling me about the app for the show and everything. I'm thinking, this is what the hobby's all about, and I'm convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt, as you've heard me say 1,000 times before, that the internet is bringing the hobby to life.
Yes, it is. And I mean, in terms of the NMRA, just certain things that they could do. I mean, that like you're a big proponent of with the YouTube and it being like basically cost neutral. There are certain things that the NMRI can get behind, again, that don't cost anything. Like take for instance that app. Now there was a gentleman that had developed that app, but all they would have to do is put the NMRA stamp of approval once they used it, and it just says officially endorsed by the NMRA. That doesn't cost anything. Yeah. Or they could YouTube videos endorsed by the NMRA, or there's certain things even before they even generate their own content that they can do before they have to worry about getting the right people and throwing content on there. Just
to endorse stuff and be aware of stuff.
Get it. The more people see that little NMRA logo that was designed by your friend, what's his name, Jim
Sacco from City Classics.
Sacco, from City Classics. The more people see that, the more people are going to, even if just seeing that, not even explaining like where, why they put it there. It'll get people just to thinking about it.
Just asking questions. That's all.
Just asking questions. What is this organization? How can I be a part of it?
Yeah.
And
all right. So let me. Okay.
That was just my.
No, that's great, but we'll get back to that because what I want to do is first. So you're probably born like what, 1983, 1984, something like that.
82.
82. I was close.
Yes.
So this is a great question because I asked this of Mike Wachowski the day he just turned 40. So your life has always been the presence of personal home computers has always been part of your life. So
since I was probably about 10 or so. Yeah.
And so, like, how did you get introduced to the hobby? Like, did you get a train for Christmas one year, just like everybody else?
Yeah, I had a train set as a kid. It was nothing great, but it was it was my first train set when I was a little kid. It wasn't even like everybody has the the Norman Rockwell, everybody gets a Lionel train
Sure.
for Christmas. I didn't even have that, but I was thrilled by the fact that I had a train. And as a child, especially like when I was living in Virginia, I remember we would go to see my grandmother at Christmas time, and we would take the Amtrak. And I can always remember as a child, just standing on the platform with my mother and just looking at just how big the wheels of the train were, and I was like, wow, and then I was hooked,
Yeah.
and so
So, like, my question would be, so you got the train set for Christmas and everything like that, and so obviously you probably spent time on computers that somebody your age would, but yet you've been drawn to the hobby. So computers haven't driven you. Technology hasn't driven you away from the hobby. You were still drawn to the hobby because you were still interested in trains and railroading.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then as a child, growing up in the much maligned Rhode Island,
Yes.
I actually had, when I lived in Rhode Island, we actually had a tourist line that used to run back and forth, and I could see it from where I was living, and I would always watch the trains go back and forth on the tourist line. And it's some days they would have 2 cars, some days they would have 3, some days they would have a caboose, and some days they wouldn't. And I always grew up just watching that back and forth, and that was another powerful memory that I always have. It's the railroad it's the Old Colony Railroad.
Okay.
And and a tourist line that used to run back and forth between I think Newport and Middletown.
Okay.
I think it was. Yeah, they used to run to like a topiary garden, which was like bushes and stuff that are all carved in these fanciful figures and stuff like that, kind of like what Edward Scissorhands used to do.
Okay. Sure. And does it still exist, that railroad?
It does. In fact, they were actually. I didn't go to the booth, unfortunately. I didn't have time, but they were actually at the Amherst show. And,
were they? Cool.
Yeah, because I had spoken to somebody over at I think it was Rail Excursions, and they said, "Oh yeah, they're here." And because Rail Excursions actually runs on the same line, which is the little pedal car where you can explore old railroad tracks and stuff like that.
All right, now let's not get too far. There's an Railroad Excursions is what exactly?
I just happened to see it at the show. It was a it's like a pedal car like that rides on standard gauge track.
Right.
And you pedal through on these right of ways, and you watch the scenery as you pedal down the track.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, they had one of the vehicles at the show. I thought that was pretty neat. It can either seat 2 or 4, and I think they usually put at least 2 groups with each other, and down the track they go.
Oh, as cool as that. Now I wonder how we would find railroad excursions. You say?
I think it's Rail Excursions.
Oh, Rail Excursions. All right.
Rail Explorers.
Rail Explorers. I'm sorry.
RailExplorers.net. Okay, Bruce has found it already. How did you figure that out already, Bruce?
Because I had heard of them before, and they're just like they're like people-powered speeders, is what they are.
Okay.
And I knew they had a line around. I think they also have had a line somewhere in New York.
Right. There's a Rhode Island division, yes, and there's a Catskills, New York one. Huh. Look at that. Rail Explorers. And I guess the rail doesn't have to be in particularly great shape to get one of these things on it, and because you're not going very fast and it doesn't weigh very much, so you could.
Mm-hmm.
So RailExplorers.net. Well, now look at that. I've learned something already. Of course, I'm always learning stuff on this thing. That's why I just could tell you'd be interesting to talk to, Greg. I'm sorry, but I could tell. But before we go on, exactly what is the point of Rhode Island? Do you know?
Well, I mean, I know I'm a bit of a history buff, so I know the history of Rhode Island.
Okay, well there you go.
And how it was founded. So it was founded by Roger Williams, and for which there's a university named after him.
Okay.
And he basically got kicked out of Massachusetts because he was I can't remember. I think he was actually stricter than the Puritans in Massachusetts, or it's either he was too strict or not strict enough for the Puritans, and he got the boot from Massachusetts, and he said, oh, I'm going to go start my own damn colony. So, and that's what he did.
Okay.
So,
And there was land. There happened to be some land available, so somebody told me. I think it was Richard Dusso that told me that he bought the land or something. And so went along like that somehow, that he bought the land and created Rhode Island or something like that.
yeah, just a small portion of land, though.
Okay. So there is some point to the state. It's not just, it wasn't just like leftovers or nothing.
No, it's a beautiful state.
It is a beautiful state.
All 40 miles across. It is a beautiful state.
It's just a teeny tiny little state.
Yeah.
All right. So you got interested as a kid. So then you went to university in Rhode Island for culinary. You were always interested in food.
Yes, even when I was a little kid, I was always interested in food, and I've always been somewhat of a creative person, and I've always been sort of a visual person,
right?
And there was just something about food that I gravitated to, aside from just satiating hunger. It was.
You're right.
Yeah, there was the artistic things, and my brothers and sisters used to make fun of me because I would always make my food look nice, and when they were just more interested in the eating. So, but whatever, I was able to make a career out of it. I actually started working in restaurants when I was 13, washing dishes, and then I did that all throughout high school, and became a line cook, and then went to school, worked throughout school. Actually did some quite extensive traveling while I was in both high school and college, and I actually was able to travel a lot by rail in
really?
during that time. Yes.
Before you go ahead, though, did you hear him, Bruce, how he said about the presentation of food?
It's always important, and we're big on that.
Well, you and I are big on present. It's all about presentation.
It is.
Yeah.
You got to have the presentation. When Bruce and I make ourselves a barbecued hamburger, it's all about the present. You can't just throw it on the plate. You got to have something there at the side.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you this: where you and I differ is that you prefer a couple of straight lines of mustard on your hot dog.
You're right.
And I prefer the very neat zigzag.
Okay, all right. Well, I can do it. I can deal. All right. Now this is a question. You may become our resident culinary expert here at the old AML Network. That job may be thrust upon you whether you want it or not.
Okay. I will accept the challenge.
All right. Yes or no? You shouldn't put ketchup on your hot dog after the age of 8.
Yeah, no ketchup.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's it, Bruce. It's done now. Our own AML culinary expert says no ketchup on a hot dog.
Yeah, no ketchup.
What are your favorite? Never mind. We'll ask you that later. Okay, so all right. So how do you mean you traveled extensively?
Well, when I was in high school, my junior year, one of my favorite teachers in high school, he ran a trip to Europe, and because I was, I already had like a little bit of a part-time job and everything like that, I was able to scrape together a few coins, and I was able to go to Europe, and it was a 10-day trip, and we did things like I took the train and from London to Windsor, leaving out of King's Cross Station.
Right.
We rode the TGV from Paris to Lucerne, Switzerland. And then I think we rode some of the German trains when we were in Germany, and it was great. You see this, the scenery, going past you at 200 miles an hour on certain sections.
Right. Yeah.
And it really is because Europe is so dense. It's really the way to travel to get from one city to the other. So I was able to do that, and I have those memories forever.
The TGV, what does that stand for?
You're gonna
I am.
descend on my 5 years of French language.
Okay. So
Le
it's
train de grande vitesse.
well, there you go. Exactly. That's kind of what I thought it was.
You'll have to
So
check that with your friends in Quebec if I pronounce that correctly.
That was pretty close.
yeah. Do you know what it is, Bruce?
Trend de grand vitesse.
Trend de grande vitesse. Isn't that and you said it goes to Switzerland.
The train of
Yeah.
big speed.
Yeah.
What did you say, Bruce?
It's the train of big speed.
Ah, the train of big speed. Ah, okay. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure. You know what? I'm pretty sure that if we didn't explain that to Mike Ostertag, there's no way he would have known what it was. So Mike, it's the train of big speed. So during this time, did you sense that you were becoming a model railroader, like when you were in high school and stuff, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was in I was into trains when I was in high school and in middle school, and where my family was living, we didn't have a lot of space, with three other siblings, and so I actually had a small 4x6 layout that I used to tuck under my bunk bed.
Okay.
And I would pull it out, and it was, wired with Atlas snap switches, and the classic Atlas train station, and the signal tower, and code 100 track, and stuff like that. And I built my collection, as it was during that time, and then as I got older, and as I went to college and stuff like that, I kind of had to pack it up as I was starting my my new job and everything like that, and I had actually put it up for about 10 years, and basically since I moved down to New Orleans. And then about 2 years ago, I had gotten the bug again, and I had had a Walthers kit that I'd bought at a hobby shop, like 4 or 5 years ago.
Right.
And it remained unbuilt. And I just decided to put it together one day. And, right about that time, I discovered Model Railroad Hobbyist, and in the back of, I think it was in the back of Model Railroad Hobbyist, there was an ad for an open house at the club that I'm now a member of. And I said, well, you know what? Let me just go check this out. And if I like it, I'll stay. And if I don't, well, just kind of let it go. So I did, and the layout that we have is huge, and I'm very fortunate that we actually have a club of the size and of the
the word is quality.
Quality, yes, size and quality that we have. Our club, we own our own building.
Really?
Yes, we do, and it's on a little parcel of land, and basically like set back from the main street there. And we like I said, we own our own building, and we actually have about 400 feet of mainline track. And it's one of the founding members of our club was the late great Andy Sporandio.
Okay. Yeah, I think I remember him. Yeah, I think I vaguely remember him talking about that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. We actually, I think it's his car. We have a car on the layout, and it's based on an old MDC roundhouse kit, but it is just detailed to the max when, with the brake lines and the figures and the interior and everything like that. And that's got to be one of Andy's cars. Sure. And so we, we're very proud of that heritage, and it's been a great experience being a member of a club. I've never joined a club before, and I had no idea what it was going to be about. So I just kind of took the plunge, and 2 years later, I'm an active member. I'm actively trying to recruit people to go to the Amherst show next year.
Okay.
And just like yourself, I've met tons and tons of people in the hobby. Even people that went to my local church that I had no idea they even had an interest in trains. They just started coming out of the woodwork, and we have conversations, and after church, and in social situations and stuff like that. And it the railroad community in New Orleans is huge.
Oh, is
in
it?
terms of oh God, yes. So we're probably one of the largest. I think we're the largest club in, I would say, like the New Orleans metro area. But there are a couple clubs up in Baton Rouge. I think there's another club on the North Shore, which is north of Lake Pontchartrain.
Right.
And then we also have there is the Louisiana Steam Train Association, which I don't know if you're familiar with that. Called they go by LASTA, which is the acronym. And what they did is they actually restored and they maintain the last steam engine that was actually built in New Orleans, number 745.
Right.
And I have friends of our club. They actually have double membership in the Crescent City Model Railroad Club and also in LASTA. So we kind of co-sponsor different events, and some people, when we have an open house, some people will come from LASTA, and when they have an open house, we'll send people over there, just to get as many people interested as possible in railroads and model railroading, and
So was the club affected at all by Katrina?
As far as I know, we weren't. We definitely weren't flooded. That part of the because we're on Metairie is outside New Orleans, so we actually didn't get any floodwaters.
Right.
I don't know how extensive the damage was, other than that, like, say from wind.
Sure. Yeah. Right. And
But,
do you know like a history of like how long have they owned their own building and stuff?
The club actually started in, I believe there was 3 original members, and they started off in one of the members' garages when they were teenagers.
Right.
And then they went on to pursue other sort of lofty careers. I think one of them became an attorney, and they bought this, or they rented the building, I think, initially, because the building was kind of subdivided, and it was at one point half of the building was a mechanic shop, half the building was a fire station, half the building was a dance studio, and then they would maintain the back half, which was the model railroad. And then I think they officially bought the building. I think it was in the mid to late 70s, and it's been in existence ever since.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the website here, and it says there was a club that was started by a group of teenagers, and then they actually bought the building in 1973.
Good. My club president will like that I actually remember the history.
Yeah. So how long have you been in New Orleans then?
I've been in New Orleans. I lived in New Orleans from about 2004 to 2005, and I left right before Hurricane Katrina, and just by sheer happenstance.
Right.
And then, but I fell in love with the culture down here, because it is very different culture than anywhere else, especially the Northeast, and I just missed it so much that in 2007, even when everything was still somewhat of a mess, I moved back down here, and I was able to kind of go back to the restaurant that I'd worked at before, and just kind of, and then after that, I kind of made that difficult transition to another job, and I was able to stabilize myself, and like I said, I've been with my current company for about almost 10 years now.
Wow. So like since you were about 25, 26 years old.
Yeah.
All right. So how old were you when you first went to New Orleans? New Orleans.
I was 22.
Okay. And then
right out of college.
And then you left and came back a few years later, like when you were like 25 or 26.
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool. So, and during that time, you were always interested in trains, but you just weren't necessarily active in the hobby or anything like that.
Yeah. I during the time when I was gone, my parents had bought a house the year before, maybe about 2 years before I left from Rhode Island, from college, and they had moved my old layout, and they kind of just stayed in the basement. But when I had moved back, I was just working on. I had a collection, but of stuff that I was working on. I would work for hours in our basement, and working on passenger cars and things like that, and
all right. Let me ask you the question I ask everybody. What is it about this hobby that draws people to it? I don't think I understand that at all, and I've been doing it forever.
Well, for me, like I said, I think it was more the the technical aspect, I guess, of it. That when you look at a steam engine, the mechanics, the
right,
everything has to work in sync, and it's the mechanics, and that always kind of fascinated me. Every child, every boy that I know, when we were growing up, they were all interested in the Tonka trucks and stuff like that. And I think it has to do with the mechanics of how things move and how things will, can pull great amounts of weight or lift dirt out of the ground or something like that. I was fascinated by that, and and I think trains were just kind of an extension of that. In addition to my experiences, growing up with, traveling on Amtrak and watching the little tourist line go by, and so that's
okay. No, yeah, I'm just always fascinated. I'm trying to figure out what it is we all have in common, because one of the great things about the hobby is it's such a glue that brings people from all walks of life together.
Yes,
and it's something that, if you're interested in model railroad and you're interested in it, and it really, really doesn't matter what the other person does or anything, it's just you become friends through that hobby. It's fascinating, and I don't know if I'll ever figure it out, but it's cool that way. I mean, look at how you and I have met, and I'm sure we'll end up being friends, and be just other people through the hobby.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when I went to the Amherst show, like I said, it was my first time going there, so I was totally bitten by shiny object syndrome.
Yeah,
and all I wanted to do was just kind of shake your hand and say hi and say I'm a fan, and the next thing you know, I got a microphone in one hand and Barb's cookie in the other.
What did you? Okay, now all right, this is going to be huge. We have had no pre-show, like we never met. We weren't out in the parking lot talking about this. We haven't had many meetings. This is going to be huge. What do you think of Barb's cookies?
I think they're great. They were very good. Yes.
They're like I always say they're like crystal meth. It's like once you're hooked, you can't put them down.
Yeah, minus the tooth loss.
Yeah, exactly. Minus the tooth loss. Exactly. Yeah, still have to brush, but if you do that, you'll be okay.
Yeah, if you eat enough of them, though, you might get tooth loss if you don't brush.
Yeah, exactly. So this is huge. I'm going to play this part for Barb. So now, Barb, I'm talking to a fellow named Greg Javenello, who's been in the culinary industry. He's worked at the Emerald Lagasse. Is that was his last name?
Yeah, Emerald Lagasse. Yes.
Yeah, he's worked at the Emerald Lagasse. So did you work as a chef there, or like somewhere in the kitchen?
Yes. I technically can't call myself a chef because I was never actually given that title.
Right.
And anybody in the restaurant building, it's a very prestigious
right
title. So you don't want to call yourself if you're not one.
Right.
So, but I worked in pretty much every part of the kitchen while I was there, but I never ascended to that next level. So, but
so yeah,
pretty much anything in that kitchen I could make.
Wow.
That way.
So we were there. We were sitting in the City Classics booth, and I handed you a cookie, and you tasted it, and you say they're great.
They were delicious.
Delicious. All right, Barb. There you go. So I have not been making any of this up. I restrict her to like 6. She used to make me like a couple of dozen at a time, and they'd be like, I can't. They'd be gone in a couple of days, and I'd be like, no, you can't do that anymore. And then I'll freeze them, and then like, oh my goodness, you take one. I found some in the freezer once, and I'd forgotten they were in there for about 3 or 4 weeks, and I took one out and I let them thaw for about 5 minutes, and I was like, oh my goodness gracious. Okay, so do you think you'll ever So what exactly do you do in the culinary industry now?
So what I do is I work for a food distribution company, and what we do is we service different restaurants in the city. Emerald's is actually one of my customers now, and basically what I do is I buy everything that a restaurant uses technically that you can't eat. So like I buy the chemicals, I buy the paper products, I buy the spoons and the spatulas and the flatware and the china and stuff like that, and that's what I do.
Okay, so you buy it and then sell it to you sell it to these different restaurants that need it.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, cool. And do you have any hope? Like, is one of your hobbies like cooking? Like, is that a big deal for you? Like, Oh
yeah. In fact, this evening, basically what we did so I'm using, I'm at my buddy's house right now, and so what I did as kind of a thank you for letting me use his computer and his headset is I made a giant pile of baby back ribs.
Oh.
And made some Boston baked beans, and his wife made some a cauliflower dish, and we had dip and beer, and and then he hooked me up on his computer, and here I am.
Perfect. And what's your buddy's name?
I'm thinking here, Lionel.
Well, yeah, I know what you're thinking, and I'm thinking it's the same thing I'm thinking.
I'm thinking you got to invite this guy to Kansas City.
Yeah.
and hook him up in your house.
Yeah, he can sleep on the yeah. Well,
I don't know if I can compete with Kansas City barbecue, but the beat does fall off the bone over here. So
yeah, there you go. I wanted, before we get too far along, so when you showed up when we first met, you were showing me this app that somebody had made for the Amherst show.
Yeah. All right. So just a little bit of backstory. So basically, when I went to the show, I'd flown up to Massachusetts, and while I was there, I'd concerned about the weather going to and from Amherst, because for me it would have been a 2-hour drive, which is not that bad, but being tired and everything like that. So what I did was I went on their Amherst website, and I booked a place on a charter bus, and okay. And the charter bus basically starts in Cape Cod, makes 2 or 3 stops, and then it heads out to Springfield, and one of the ladies that organized the trip, and she's been going to the Amherst for 20 years, she just passed along this email that was from one of the people that has gone on the charter bus for the past few years, and he, in his spare time in his retirement, basically develops apps.
Really?
And yeah, and he had developed this app, and he just sent us the link and told us to download a certain the file. I think it was the FileMaker app from the App Store, and so I downloaded it, and then you patched in the link there from the email, and then it populated on the phone, and while I was on the bus, I actually happened to sit right next to the guy who developed it, and he was kind of explaining to me different things, and he said, "Oh, it's a rough edit. There still might be some bugs in there." And I was like, I'm just looking at it, I'm just amazed that this guy could one put together something like this, and because if there was a bug, I couldn't find it.
Right.
But it was great because it had a map of all 4 buildings. It had the numbered booths for every vendor and every exhibitor in there. You could organize your photos by the exhibitor and by the building, and you could organize your own itinerary for what exhibitors you wanted to see versus the ones you think you could maybe afford to skip over, ones that you'd seen in the past. And I thought it was a great tool.
Huh. And do we have any way of tracking it down? Like, is there any way you can have people track it down now? Is there any kind of a website about it or anything?
I mean, I have the email, and I have the link in there.
Okay.
I could send it to you, and we could see if it's. I opened it the other day just to kind of look through some of the stuff that I had used.
Right.
And it's still active, it still works, and right. I think what it is that every year he's got to update it, because every year
the show changes.
Come and
yeah,
the show changes, people change buildings where they're exhibiting, so it's still available.
Okay.
And when I go back next year and I get a place on the charter bus again, I'll probably be able to talk to him again about and see what else he's done with it, to see where if I don't get an update beforehand.
And you say it was a retired fella?
Yeah, I asked him. I said, well, "So what did you used to do before you retired?" And he said, "Oh, I used to work in construction."
Really?
And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then, but I guess he was, and he said he used his computer as part of his business, so he knew how to make apps and stuff like that for business projects and stuff like that. So I said, "Cool."
Yeah. So was it an older gentleman then, or?
Yeah, I want to say he was probably late 50s, maybe early 60s. He was doing this.
Okay, so there's actually some of us that actually use computers, and see, that's my thing. Like, let's not. I embrace all the technology. I don't like any. I'm glued to my phone. I do not apologize for using the technology that has been given to us in this day and age. Absolutely do not. I think it's the greatest thing going.
No. Well, I mean, I have to use the technology. I mean, I'm in front of a computer all day long, making and trying to keep our business going with the efficiencies and stuff like that. So, if I had to do pencil and paper and stuff like that to do my job, it would never get done.
No.
And I have my screen in front of me. I have my smartphone on my desk. Now, I'm not even, but I will say this: I'm still not as technologically savvy as yourself. I mean, I used Skype for the first time the other day when I talked to you, and I was still trying to figure out the webcam and no webcam, and so it's a work in progress for me. But yeah, at least the one thing I can say is at least I'm not afraid to try it.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope you're going down using those two, the words technically savvy and the word Lionel together. I don't really think they would fit in the same sentence. I happen to know, I think Bruce got me started on Skype, and I know that. And if it's something I want to learn, but like, it'd be like, no, technically savvy. No, not wrong guy. You're thinking of some other Lionel guy. Okay, so I didn't even know about these charter buses to the show. So, how did you find out about those?
I just went on the Amherst Railway Society website, and they basically have two pages. They have one that's specifically for the show, and then they have their main. If you're a member of their particular organization, they have that side of their page.
Right.
And if you look under. I forget what exactly the tab is, but there's, when you make your arrangements to come to the show, they list, the hotels that you can stay at, the rates that you can get at, and, what discount codes I guess you could use to stay at the hotels, specifically for the event. And then underneath it, and then, further on down, they have
charter buses. I found it.
Yeah. They have charter buses. And one of the charter bus that I went on, like I said, started off in Cape Cod, somewhere, was it called
Karen's 20th Annual Amherst Railway Train Show Express Bus from Cape Cod?
Yeah, that would be it. Yeah, Miss Karen.
Okay, and how much did it cost?
It's $45, and that includes your ticket to the show for a day, and then transportation to and from. Wow,
that's a good deal. $45, and you get your ticket to the show and transportation there and back.
Yeah, they give you wristbands on as soon as you pull into the Eastern States Exposition Complex. Someone from the Amherst Railway Society will get on the bus and they'll hand out your wrist straps, so you don't even have to wait in line.
Wow.
And then you just flash your little wristband and you go right in and away you go.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. You're just a fountain of information. So now the other night when we were testing out Skype and you were insisting that I had to look at you on your phone.
my ugly mug.
Yeah. I saw you were sitting there at your workbench, your modeling workbench. So what are you working on now? Like, what's happening right now? So in the model railroading world, you're part of the Crescent City Club, and that's probably your main focus, is it?
Yeah. My apartment is too small to maintain a layout.
Right.
Though I have toyed with the idea of the of doing the one module approach.
Right.
I haven't gotten anything concrete about that yet. I have some structures that I could put on there, but I have to actually go out to Home Depot and get myself some foam insulation board and get working. But that's about all the space that I would have. So what I did was I built myself an amazing workbench, and I basically got all the components from IKEA, and I've got all the tools. I've got the lighting. I've got the the X-Acto mat. I've got detailed parts coming out my ears. I've got, and what I'm currently working on is I'm teaching myself DCC, getting information both from the club and also just trying things on my own. And I'm also working on a structure for the club. It's an old building, and I can probably email you some photos of it, where it started at and where it is now. But basically, it was a building from the original layout, from I guess like from the 1970s. Right. And it was subject to the ravages of time, and certain parts had fallen off, and certain things had been damaged. It was like a board stock kit that somebody had put together, and I think it originally it was a slaughterhouse, but then it suddenly got repurposed into becoming a mayonnaise factory. And if you've ever been to New Orleans, one of the things that we're known for is our love of blue plate mayonnaise, right? Which is so that was one of the buildings that we wanted to replicate on our layout. Or that they wanted to replicate on the layout back then. So they basically repurposed this building for that. And I am kind of keeping with the whole mayonnaise factory theme, but I've completely redone the exterior. I've scratch built a like an overhang on the top. Right. I used some of the corrugated roofing material from Campbell scale models, and I built a nice kind of like a veranda roof of the corrugated metal. And eventually, I put new windows in there from Tichy Train Group, and eventually I'm gonna light it with some of the Woodland Scenics lighting components from the Just Plug. Components.
Oh yeah, I saw something about that. Explain that to me, because I actually saw something about that on I think Ken Patterson's show. It's like the newest thing, isn't it? Like some new thing that Woodland Scenics has, is it not?
Yeah. And I tell you what, if you've ever shied away from lighting a structure or lighting your layout, I mean, it's amazingly simple, and the quality of the lighting and the components just really makes it easy. So basically what it is, and if you watch Ken Patterson, and as I do, he explains all the electronics behind it, and there is some science behind it. It's not just, a plug and a switch. There's filtered current that goes to each LED, and it is LED lighting as opposed to your traditional grain of wheat bulbs that you would have to, fish your wires through the through the layout and then solder them somewhere to some connection and hope there isn't a short somewhere. Everything is very compact. Everything just it just plugs in.
It's called the Just Plug lighting system.
Yeah, and the great feature that I like is that every bulb that you plug into the socket is dimmable, so you can really kind of control the level of lighting to create certain shadow effects, and it really does bring a scene together. That train station model that I had done that I had done earlier when I first started getting back into the hobby, I went crazy with the Just Plug situation. I must have put about 10 or 15 different lights in that thing, and before I had built my workshop, my workbench, I just snapped some pictures on my phone of it, and just turn the lights out and take a pictures with my iPhone. the results were great, and I've shown them to people, and everybody seems amazed that I was able to get the lighting just right, to get the shadows just right, and everything like that. So, like I said, if you've ever shied away from lighting because you're unsure about resistors and whether or not the light bulbs are going to burn out, or whether or not it's going to melt a hole in the side of your building because the plastic warms up too much, try this system. It really does work.
Yeah, there's some sort of a hub that you plug the lights into. So is there much? So do the lights come on the end? Like really, all you have to do is just take the light and place it where you want in the building, and then just run the wire to the hub. What do they call it? The light hub.
The light hub. And
then you just plug it in, and then there's dimming dials on each light and everything.
Yeah.
Wow.
The interior, if you just want to light like the interior and have light coming through the windows, they have one large LED that you can basically either, and with a self-adhesive stick to it, and you can either mount it to the roof, or you can mount it to the ground or one of the walls, and it'll kind of disperse light through a building. They have really tiny LEDs that you can use for recessed lighting, which I used in as part of the overhangs on the station, and then they have the different lighting components where you can achieve that sort of gaslight look effect, and then they have like the gooseneck lights with the old metal shades around them, and like I said, all of them are dimmable, and you can adjust the strength of every single one independently, and you really do get some great results.
And the other day you were talking about, that's really cool. I wonder how long this Just Plug lighting system has been in actual existence, because I've only just heard of it.
Yeah, I think it's only been a year, so it hasn't been that long.
Yeah, it's pretty slick.
A year, maybe two. But I mean, they've got. I haven't really gone too deep into it, but I mean, they have lights in red, green, amber, different sizes. They have cars with headlights that work that you can wire up. They have street lights of all different eras, from modern all the way down to your cast iron pole lamps, and they're available in N scale, HO, and O. And
why do you think they have them in N scale? Is there any point? Just kidding. That was rude. And I apologize to all N scalers, and I apologize to anybody that lives in Rhode Island, except for Wayne Mullahan, superfan number 9.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Go ahead.
I will tell you this. I actually did an interesting installation. I actually used some of the N scale components.
Okay.
So I had done another structure that had a rather tall rectangular sign.
Right.
So what I wanted to do is I wanted to have two lights, kind of like floodlights, kind of angling up towards the top of the sign.
Okay.
So the light would kind of go up the length of the sign. And so what I did was I actually took the N scale gas lights, and which are essentially a clear casting with the LED in the center,
right.
And then it's just painted on the outside to represent like the top and the finial of the gas light. Well, what I did was I scraped off the paint of the shade, and I sanded it down so it was basically flat, and then I repainted the bottom black. So basically, what I was able to do was I was able to refocus the light, and I was able to just with a little CA and then the leads going through it, I was able to wire the sign so that what was once a gas light is now two floodlights angling up towards the sign, and it really did come out as a neat effect using that system.
Right.
And like I said, I saw them. I saw them at the hobby shop, and I said, you know what, I'm going to try this out. And for I don't know, it was less than $15 for a pair of these. And I said, I'm going to take a chance and see if I can do this. Because I had looked at, the dealer was actually able to take them out of the package, so I could really look at them up close to see how they were built. So I said, I'm going to try this and see if it'll work, and it worked like a charm.
So how much does one of the lighting hubs cost? Roughly.
I want to say the lighting hubs are around $15, I think.
Oh, really? So not some kind of extravagant amount then.
No, and you can if you get them at Hobby Lobby or something like that, if you have a Hobby Lobby near you,
Right.
you can use they have like their 40% off coupon off of one item.
Right.
You can go there every week and get yourself a little Just Plug lighting component and save some money that way. And then and then they're also available from Micro Market at a really good price too. So that's where I've gotten a lot of my components, and you can find them on eBay and things like that.
And what's the hobby shop situation like in New Orleans?
There's one main hobby shop that I go to, and it's called Hub Hobby, and it's actually a couple miles from maybe about a couple miles from our club, which is great because I can hit hobby shop first and then get my supplies and then go to the club and either work on stuff or go home and work on stuff at my workbench. And that hobby shop was originally in New Orleans, and it was destroyed during Katrina, but they rebuilt in the neighboring town of Metairie, or the neighboring city of Metairie, which is where our club is.
Okay.
And
so do you live in New Orleans, or do you live outside of New Orleans?
No, I live in New Orleans. I live in a section called Algiers, and which is basically over the river. And it's kind of confusing because they call where I live that's part of New Orleans. They call it the West Bank, but It's actually south of the city if you look at it geographically. But it's just because of the way the river bends,
right? That
it's considered the West Bank.
Okay, I see. All right, because the river kind of twists. What river is that?
That's the Mississippi.
Okay, because it twists and turns. Well, on a side note, Bruce, were you aware that Windsor, Ontario is actually south of Detroit?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, it's kind of a very unusual anomaly in Canada. Yeah,
cool.
but I digress. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, two things we want to talk about is you were saying to me about the age of the members of your club. Your club is not an old club by any stretch of the imagination.
No, we had a number of people that are 20 and under. I think we had 4 members. We have 4 members that are under 20, and like I said, one of them knew DCC better than I did. So I was constantly asking him questions about what to do and how to install it and stuff like that. And he actually watched me put my first decoder in a locomotive of his.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that was an interesting,
Yeah.
The student becoming the master, I guess. As it were. But we have all the ranges. Our president, I think he's got to be in his 40s, late 40s. I don't suppose the president of your club is Bruce Kelly, superfan number 1.
Because he's trying to be the president of every club in North America. I think that's his secret goal. He just won't admit to it. So okay, so you've got an age group in your club that again puts to rest that myth. I think it's an urban myth that everybody in the hobby is over the age of 68.
Well, I'll tell you what, I had an interesting discussion with one of my friends, for a few after church today. And he says, and what he does is he actually there's a G Gauge club that's that's located in City Park in New Orleans, and it's basically right next to a small little amusement park, and they have a huge G Gauge display. And he says it. He says, look, he says that for a while it was kind of restricted, not really restricted, but it was kind of limited to the older established gentlemen who just kind of like to tinker and stuff like that. But even he has said that, you would be amazed at the age group of people that come to the train garden and just watch the trains go by. and everything from little kids all the way up to adults, and he says it's just like you said, it's a myth that it's limited to older people, and that only the older established folks should be catered to.
Yeah,
And
I think that's like way out of line now.
yeah.
Like I just no, but I was sorry to cut you off. That was rude, but I do that all the time, anyways. But no, but it's just and I'm convinced it's the internet, because you could be, like I say, you could be watching Russian car crash videos, and then they'll say, "Oh, well, then you might be interested in this." It'll be some guy's model railroad, and before you know it, it's somebody else that goes, "Well, I didn't know things were like this." I mean,
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you what. That's how I found. I think you're familiar with this gentleman. I think his name is Dale Engel, and he runs Toyman Television. Have you ever watched him?
Yes.
Him and his wife are enormously entertaining, and that's how I obviously I had an interest on YouTube of model trains, but I just happened to find that. And his big thing is at the end of every his videos is like, "I'm not sure how you found this. Hope you didn't find it boring, and I hope you will subscribe." And he says that at the end of every video. And I've watched a bunch of his videos, and like, they're great, and he really does a great job filming them and editing them, and putting the music together. And
well, I interviewed a fella his name is Adam Pinellas, and he lives in south of Salt Lake City. And he's coming up soon, and he's actually a conductor on the California Zephyr with Amtrak, and Toyman Television was there visiting him. And that's another way. I highly recommend Toyman Television, because he finds all sorts of interesting stuff.
Yeah. My favorite video from him, if you haven't seen it, is when they did the caboose ride on the Cumbers and Toltec.
Oh yeah,
that's a great video. He does a lot of good music to it, and it's he's on a train, and there's 3 cabooses attached to it, and it's he tells you in the video, but it's basically a training situation for people who want to be, I guess, steam engineers on railroads around the country. They'll go to the Cumbers and Toltec, get trained on the train,
right?
And then they'll go off, I guess, to their respective railroads, or they'll just go through the training process as a learning experience, And that was one of my favorite videos. They really did a good job with that.
That's cool. I mean, and then you're a big fan of Ken Patterson too, you said.
Yes, love Ken Patterson. I wait for the notification on my YouTube to watch Ken Patterson.
I know I've been talking to Ken a little bit. Yeah. And do you watch his What's Neat This Week blog, or what does he call it? Podcast with, he's got Daniel Coombs and Mike Buddy. Do you watch that one too?
Yeah, I watch all of his shows. And again, it's one of those things that I kind of stumbled upon on YouTube, and I had watched a few episodes, a few of the newer episodes, I think starting last year. And then I watched every single one that he had on YouTube. I would watch a couple every day, and I watched them all. And like I said, it's great because you can see you can see people like Daniel Coombs on there, the youth of the youth of the hobby on there, but you can also see really what it takes if you really want because he's a professional photographer. If you really want to get into that part of the hobby with the photography,
right,
and learning the little tips and tricks for getting just that right shot, not necessarily building a giant layout like he has, but just learning how to get that right shot. He's a great resource, and he's a great credit to the hobby.
So now someday you're going to want to build your own layout.
Yes.
And what's it going to be? What are you interested in?
Well, my railroad of choice is I'm big into the Seaboard airline and the Seaboard coastline, and I guess the sort of the derivatives of that. I think when I was talking to you the other day and I was fiddling with the video, you could see the different fallen flags that I had above my workbench.
Right.
But and I don't have all of them. I'm gonna have to get the rest of them on my next trip to Amherst. And it's weird because for whatever reason I fell in love with the Seaboard Airline Railroad when I lived in Rhode Island.
Okay.
And it all comes back to Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And one of the first I guess sort of serious locomotive that I bought was an Athearn SD45 that I still have, and it was labeled for Seaboard. And from then on, I just looked for stuff that was labeled with Seaboard. And at the time before Athearn had gotten bought up by Horizon, they had a bunch of Seaboard locomotives. So I just kept buying them here and there, and Kato had the NW2, and then Proto 2000. They just had they had all of the E units, and I have all of those, and then most recently I bought a GP9 from Athearn, an Athearn Genesis GP9. And that was my first solo installation of a decoder of a DCC system. So
right.
So I actually bought the decoders at the Amherst show, bought the speakers, and during the installation learned a few things. Learned that I had my first go around, I realized I'd bought the wrong speaker, so I had to go back to the supplier and get me the right speaker. And then I realized I had blown out the grain of wheat bulbs that they were still using. So now I have to get some of the new LEDs, and I've found some great links on YouTube on how to do that. So I just have to go send away for those. It's one of the, you live and you learn. It's trial and error, and I'm that much more experienced now. If you can call me experienced.
Yeah, no. Well, you've done it once, and now the next time will be that much easier. So, what year was the Genesis that they make the Genesis GP9 that it didn't come with like a DCC or anything like that?
I want to say that the locomotive that I bought was probably one of their DC versions. Okay. And so I had to completely take out the board and put in the Tsunami, actually the Econami decoder in there. So I want to say there probably was a DCC sound version of it, but that particular locomotive that I bought, because I had bought it through a friend of mine that actually bought it because he knew that I was into Seaboard, and he got a great deal on it. He says, "Hey, do you want it?" So I said, "Sure," but he says, "But you're going to have to put a decoder in it in order to get it to run on our layout at the club." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm up for the Pepsi challenge." Right. And so, yeah.
So, what DCC system do they use at the Crescent City? Why is it called Crescent City? Do you know?
It's called the New Orleans itself is called the Crescent City because again, going back to the way the river bends, originally the city formed basically a crescent on the river. Like if you look at where the French Quarter is, if you look at a map and you look at where the French Quarter is and how it basically made a crescent shape around the bend in the river, that's basically where the city, the old city, was kind of confined to. Right. And then outside of that crescent, you kind of had in the Old South, you had plantations on the outside of the city.
Okay. And we should describe for all those folks in New Zealand and Australia and all around the world, like New Orleans is like right on the Gulf of Mexico. And there's this giant lake called Lake Pontchartrain, which is just sits on the north side of it. And and there's a bridge that goes straight across the middle of it.
Yes.
Which always amazes.
All 27 miles of it.
I know, yeah, 27-mile long bridge. So Lake Pontchartrain probably isn't that deep then. Is that probably
I've asked people before, and I think they say it's probably about between like 30 and 40 feet deep in certain spots, yeah.
They would never build that bridge nowadays. It'd be like you'd have to go around the lake, but somehow they decided years ago to build that bridge.
Yeah, well, there is a route that goes around the lake, but but it's a lot it's a lot faster to go over that lake. But
Well, yeah. And is that just a 2-lane road, that Lake Pontchartrain Bridge, or is it a 4-lane?
it's 2 lanes in both directions.
Okay.
And there's actually two bridges that kind of go across Lake Pontchartrain. There's that's the Causeway Bridge, and that's the longer one of the two. And then they have what they call the twin spans, which is it's a similar bridge, but it's a lot shorter. And that's more to the east. It's more to the east.
That's Interstate 10 there.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I think we've pretty much covered everything, have we not, Bruce?
Yes, I would say so.
Except there's lots more to cover. Except this has turned out to I knew you'd be.
Except here's a trivia question for our friend Cena who lives in New Orleans.
Okay.
Who was perhaps the most famous model railroader to come out of or live in New Orleans?
Good question.
Famous.
And it's not Andy Sprandio because we already talked.
No, it's not Andy Sprandio.
You got me here.
Frank Ellison.
Wow.
Frank Ellison. Okay.
Frank Ellison, who was very prolific in the hobby and writing in the 40s and 50s, and had the O-scale Delta lines layout, which you can find information about by working the Google, and also Model Railroader on their website. He wrote a 6-part series of articles originally in the 1940s, which was reprinted in the 60s, called The Art of Model Railroading. And it is just a fantastic series to read and get his thoughts on what the hobby's all about. And one of the true pioneers of the hobby.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
He really was.
Well, we actually have an extensive library at the club, and I think we actually have like some of the. If we don't have the original, we have close to the original Model Railroader. And so I'll probably have to go. If you can email me that the name of that, I can go look at it and see if we can find it, and give it a good perusing.
Yeah, and there was a great column in Model Railroader in the late '90s and early 2000s that you might enjoy.
I actually do remember reading some of your columns in the '90s. I actually got Model Railroader when I was younger.
Yeah,
and I actually got my subscription from the little card that they used to put in the Atherton Blue boxes.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Know? Yeah, and you say so. New Orleans has a very active model railroad community. Then. Oh
yeah. Like I said, there's just the numerous organizations, and just railroading in general. I mean, we have 5 Class 5 railroads that go through New Orleans, and we've got Union Pacific, BNSF, CN. What are the other ones? Trying to think. Kansas City Southern,
right?
And we used to have CSX, but I don't think they're not coming down here too often anymore.
Yeah. So.
But
yeah. And how many members does the club have?
I think we're right around 32 members right now.
Okay. And what are the dues?
The dues are there. It's 25. It's 25 a month.
Right.
And that entitles you to, you come out for, you can basically bring your collection so long as it's DCC compatible.
Right.
And you can, on Friday nights, we all get together and, if you can get there early enough, they'll go out to dinner and and then we'll run trains after that. And, we'll work on the layout and maintain it. So got a bunch of projects that, we're working on a bunch of projects right now. We had just installed a big staging yard above where our library is, with a big balloon track, and that's all wired up with tortoises. And we have one guy that's kind of working on it right now in terms of the wiring, and it's just, I mean, he knows what's going on, but I look at it and I'm just amazed because it looks like a spaghetti factory to me. But he's got this beautiful panel that he's put together with all these double pole, double throw switches with the lights, indicator lights, and all the tortoise switch machines. And so we've been working on that. And then we've actually, when you own your own building, you have to maintain the building.
Right.
So we have been, over the past few weeks, we've actually been putting new siding on the building.
Okay.
And so over the past couple weekends, I've been over there, basically, ripping down the old siding, putting new foam insulation board and moisture barrier up, and so we've been doing that. And then one of the neat things, and I'll probably see if I can get a picture of this, but because the building had two halves and one of them was an addition, it was the level of craftsmanship was, shall we say, not its best.
Right.
And so we basically had to redo all the studs, and then we also had to redo all the plywood underneath, because some of the plywood had rotted. And one of the things that we did was we actually, as we were sealing up everything with the plywood, was we actually put one of our a dummy of one of our custom painted F7s in the wall, so that when 40, 50, 60, 70 years from now, when they demolish the building and the layout's no longer working, that they're going to find this locomotive in the wall.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
And
a little time capsule.
Yeah, a little time capsule.
Yeah, then you never know. It might go on and on forever and ever. You just don't know. And you say it's
we hope.
You say it's 2 floors, the building?
Well, no. What it was is originally it was the building was a military barracks, and I think originally it used to be on the campus of near UNO, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And what they did is that after the war, it was basically considered surplus, so they moved the building out to its current location, and then they built onto it. So it's 1 floor. It's 1 floor, but when you come in the main entrance, it's kind of almost like a sunken living room type area, and then you have to go up a couple steps to the second half, which is the original barracks part, and that's where the layout is. So we have a club room in the front, and then the layout's in the back, and you have to go up a couple stairs to the layout in the back.
All right, I'm trying to look on it on Google Maps. So, like, is it where there's a car wash across the street, or is it farther down that street? It's on Leicester Avenue.
Yeah, it's on Leicester Avenue.
Okay.
It's what is it, 601 Leicester?
Yeah.
Yeah. It should be a long white building, and it should be basically on a corner lot.
Right.
It's there's plenty of, like, I guess, front yard in front of it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I see it. That's cool. Very cool. Very cool. And all right, man, I think we covered a lot of ground tonight. We covered Amherst Train Show app, and learned all about Rhode Island and New Orleans, and oh man,
Amarillo Lagasse. And so what's the future look like for Greg now? What's happening in the near future? Oh, what kind of DC system is it?
We use NCE.
Ah, okay. Is that kind of the one that's used in the area? Because a lot of times, so how did you, any idea how you guys ended up with NCE, which is my favorite, but
though I'm not quite sure, because the system was already in place by the time I got there.
Right. Okay. All right. I think that's it, Bruce.
Yes, I think so.
I think we've covered it all, man.
We've covered a bunch, and if we have any other questions, we'll get in touch with them again.
Well, absolutely.
Sounds great.
That's the problem. That's the problem with this podcast is there's so many people to interview, and now it's like we could go back and talk to people we haven't talked to for a long time. This was just a huge mistake on my part to even start this thing. All I wanted to do is hear what I sounded like talking to somebody on the internet. And now it's this really cool podcast where I've met all kinds of really neat people, and like you and I never would have met had I not started the podcast. And now I know this cool guy and lives in New Orleans that is a good cook, or almost basically a chef, and knows all kind of stuff. And oh man, if I go to New Orleans, I can just say, "Hey, Greg, where do I go to eat?"
Oh, absolutely. I can give you tons of places to eat. And the next time you want to come, you're on your way down to Florida, you can just take a detour onto I-10 and come see us, and we'd be happy to have you.
Yeah, exactly. Does Crescent City Club, do they have an open house?
Yeah, we have open houses several times throughout the year. We have a couple in the summertime, and then we have one around Thanksgiving. We have a couple around Christmas time, and then we have one right after Christmas.
Okay. And are you one of those guys that complains about the heat in the summer?
I've got, honestly, I've gotten used to it over the years.
Yeah.
I think personally, I'd still rather be cold than hot, but I've learned to deal with it.
Yeah. See, now I think as you get older, I'd rather be hot than cold. I get tired of being cold in the winter. That's why I go to.
Yeah.
I have my house in Florida. I'm lucky. I get to go down there quite a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, Bruce. I think it's time to give out the email address.
Our email address, for those who are fascinated by this thing called the internet and the fads that go with it, such as email.
Mm-hmm.
Our email address is modelerslife, modelers with one L, modelerslife@gmail.com.
That's right. And we have a website, amodelerslife.com. And if you go there, you can find a link to our Facebook page, which reminds me, I haven't even listed the most recent two podcasts that I put out, which were one of Tony's AML product review or product news ones, and I think it was Springhurst. Springhurst. That's what I'm going to start calling.
Springhurst.
That's what I'm going to
The Great Springhurst Show.
Yeah, I'm going to start calling it the Springhurst Show. I'm punchy all day. I must have done 7 or 8 intros and outros for the different interviews that I did up there, and I'm punchy, like you're trying to go, okay, so here's another interview from Springfield, and this time we're talking to Greg Javenello, and he is a cool young guy. And it's like, oh my goodness, you just get punchy doing it. I never in a million years thought I'd be sitting in front of a microphone doing this sort of thing.
just need to cut back on the Red Bulls when you're doing those.
Yeah, exactly. Too much. Okay, so we have a website called themodellerslife.com. You can see it, and there's a link to our Facebook page, and there's a link to our Patreon page. And our Patreon page, this is one of our free shows, but our Patreon page is where we keep all our other stuff because there's just not enough room. And that keeps the podcast going, and it keeps me encouraged to do it. So that's pretty cool. And I think that's it.
There's links there to Libsyn and iTunes.
Yeah, there's links on the page to Libsyn and iTunes. And there's even links there now for if you want to email Bruce the Mailboy or the Superfan #1 directly, you can. I do a okay job maintaining the website, but it's not what everything else other than doing the actual podcast. It's not as much fun as doing the actual podcast because people are so interesting to talk to. I was really glad you came up and talked to me at Springhurst.
Yeah, like I said, it was a. I was a fan, and I just wanted to say hi and shake your hand and thank you for what you've done for the hobby, and then next, like I said, next thing I have a microphone in one hand and cookie next. Here I am.
Yeah, that will teach you.
And now Barb knows that a guy that worked at Emerald Lagasse's restaurant thinks her cookies are good. So this is going to, for all the points I've screwed up, this is going to score me a lot of points when she hears this part. She's going to love that. And
she's going to make you a whole box full of cookies.
Yeah, there we go. Now we're getting somewhere. Or make somebody a box full of cookies. And what else was I going to say? Oh yeah, how did you know it was me when you were coming by the City Classics booth?
Well, I mean, like I said, I remember, I've watched some of your videos, some of the videos that are on the AML on YouTube, and I do remember what you looked like from the Model Railroader days. So,
Right. Okay. No, that's all right.
I think right before I had gone to the show, I had listened to the thing with Jim Sacco, and I knew that it was City Classics, and you said that you used to.
Okay. All right.
Post up in the City Classics booth. So I said, that's got to be him, especially if he's putting a microphone in somebody else's face right now.
Now, here's an important question for you, though. You've seen his picture before in Model Railroader and seen him in person of late. Would you agree he looks remarkably good for a man of his age?
Oh, absolutely.
There you go. Okay, you're now one of my favorite fans. All right, Greg. Have you listened to enough of the podcast to know what comes next? Do you know what your line is?
I do.
All right. Wow. All right. So we're not even going to practice. Well, Greg, as the sun slowly sets over the back 40 and we close the big barn doors. I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say,
Happy rails to you.
It's another Lincoln Homer.